Petras released her third studio album, Detour, on May 29th, and since then, it's sparked no shortage of discussion. Hey everybody, Iscariot here, finding meaning where there probably isn't any, and today we're talking about one of the most talked about pop albums of the year so far. Whether it's Anthony Fantano's review receiving pushback from fans or Pitchfork awarding the record a respectable 7.6, one thing has become pretty clear. Nobody seems to agree on what Detour actually is, which is fitting because for an album called Detour, the conversation surrounding it has taken quite a few detours itself. Some people see it as Kim Petras' boldest and most personal project yet, and others see it as an inconsistent collection of ideas that never fully comes together. So after spending the last couple weeks with the album, I wanted to throw my own hat into the ring. Here's what I think. Kim Petras' Detour is an album that could have very easily fallen apart. Not because these songs are bad, actually most of them are great, but because this album takes so many risks that, in theory, should make it feel inconsistent. It jumps between sounds, emotions, and ideas constantly. Some songs feel euphoric, and some feel lonely, but then some feel almost directionless before suddenly revealing exactly where they were heading all along. And yet somehow, that's exactly what makes Detour work. The title is probably the easiest place to start. A detour is rarely convenient. It's not the route you expected to take. It's messy, unpredictable, and usually takes longer than you'd like. Throughout this album, Kim seems fascinated by that idea. Not just lyrically, but sonically. Songs rarely stay where they begin. A track will start as a glossy pop anthem before suddenly becoming introspective. A confident moment will collapse into self-doubt, production choices appear, disappear, and reappear later in completely different emotional contexts. The album often feels skittish, almost restless, but I don't think that's a flaw. I think that's the point. Because Detour isn't an album about certainty, it's an album about searching. That becomes especially apparent on songs like DTLA. I've seen people criticize this track for feeling unfocused, but honestly, I think that's what makes it fascinating. DTLA constantly changes shape. It refuses to settle into one mood for very long. What initially sounds like another flashy pop song slowly reveals a much more vulnerable center hiding underneath. The song feels like somebody trying to convince themselves they're fine before eventually just admitting that they aren't. And that's an idea that appears all over this album. There's a tension between the image Kim presents and the emotions she's trying to communicate underneath it. Between confidence and insecurity, celebration and frustration, and reinvention and uncertainty. Detour lives in that tension. That's why I think some of the album's strangest moments are actually some of its strongest. Take Jeep. This is a song that initially caught me completely off guard. Not because it's radically different from the rest of the album, but because of how emotionally exposed it feels. It's still heavily produced, it's still unmistakably Kim Petras, but there's a vulnerability here that makes the track stand out, and it almost sounded a little bit country at first to me. It's the kind of song that becomes stronger the more time you spend with it. Not because the meaning changes, but because the emotions start sinking in, and the unexpectedness of it starts wearing off. And honestly, that's true for a lot of this album. Some records give you everything immediately, what you expect, but Detour doesn't. It asks you to sit with it, to revisit songs and notice the small details you missed the first time, to pay attention to how ideas repeat and evolve throughout the track list instead of taking one glance at them and deciding that they are, purely flashy or copies of other people's work. Now, that's not to say the album is perfect. There are definitely moments where some ideas could have been pushed further. There are songs that I wish spent more time developing their strongest concepts or being developed on their own. There are sections where the pacing can feel a little uneven, and I think Kim and her producers could have done a lot better on that. But even when the album stumbles, I never feel like it's standing still. Every choice feels intentional, and every detour feels like it's leading somewhere. And that matters, because I'd much rather listen to an ambitious album that occasionally misses the mark it's trying to achieve than a safe album that never aims for anything bigger, like Kim speaks on having made in the past due to her label's, expectations of her. The clearest example of that ambition is Brutalist. Not only is it one of the best songs here, I genuinely think it's one of the best songs Kim has ever made, especially on her own. The writing is deeply personal, the imagery is vivid, and the production perfectly supports everything the song is trying to communicate. It's emotional without feeling melodramatic, and specific without being inaccessible or too experimental. More importantly, it feels uniquely hers, and that's something Detour does better than almost any previous Kim Petras project has. For years, one of the biggest criticisms of her music was that she could sometimes disappear into the sounds surrounding her. These songs were fun and the hooks were catchy, but there were moments where they felt interchangeable with whatever trends were dominating pop music at the time. Fantano himself even said that essentially Kim Petras almost sounded like in the past she was trying to copy Charli XCX or other people indirectly, I feel. Detour changes that, not because it completely abandons those influences, but because Kim finally feels comfortable bending them into something more personal. Even when the album enters familiar hyperpop and electropop territory, it rarely feels like imitation. It feels like somebody using those sounds to tell their own story and make their own music. By the time the record reaches its final stretch, that's what I found myself appreciating most. Not the individual songs or specific hooks, but the personality, willingness to be messy, take risks, and to make an album called Detour and then actually commit to that idea. Because a lesser version of this record would have taken the safe route, but this one doesn't. And while I don't think every experiment here succeeds equally, I walked away feeling something I haven't always felt after a Kim Petras album. Excitement and uncertainty. Not just for this project, but for what comes next for Kim. Because if Detour is Kim Petras proving she's willing to take the long way around, then I think she's heading in a very interesting direction. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and bye guys.